Nancy Duchesneau is a senior P12 research associate at EdTrust, and she joins us now from here in Atlanta. Thank you so much for being up with us early here. It's a really important topic. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it's a great time to talk about this issue, which broadly has bipartisan support. So, as I mentioned, these grants were created as a response to school shootings. Many Republicans are quick to blame these horrific mass shootings not on guns, but on mental health issues. So how does cutting these programs conflict then with the administration's goals of creating safer schools?
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so these mental health supports are really critical for creating safer schools because we know that they're actually the most effective way to create a positive school climate where students can build relationships with each other, and learn how to handle conflict better, and develop like a feeling of belonging and welcoming within their schools, which is actually what prevents violence in the first place. And so, by Trump's ignoring the bipartisan agreement, and like you said, again, this is bipartisan between Republicans and Democrats, there's some real concern around how this could actually create less safety within schools. And it's also going to have really far reaching consequences for students' well being and their lives, and academic outcomes for them as well. And this is particularly true for the students who are most vulnerable, including students of color, students with disabilities, many youth who don't have access to mental health supports within their own communities in low income areas.
Mm. Now, it's just important to point out that some of your research, I think, shows that these sort of mental health measures do more to prevent school shootings than say hardening schools. Is that right?
That is exactly right. So when we think about violence within schools, it's actually the violence is the result of an escalation. It always starts with some sort of grievance or conflict, and then it escalates and escalates and escalates to the point of violence. And so when we have police or metal detectors within schools, that's really targeting the end of that escalation, where frankly it's too late at that point because violence is already underway or planned. And what we really want to do is target before a conflict can become violence.
Mm.
So that means really making sure that students have supports in handling conflict better with each other, and building those relationships and repairing relationships when conflict occurs.
Now, some of the programs affected provide counseling to students who need help after the disruptions of COVID, but people argue the COVID emergency is over. So why do students still need those programs?
Because the mental health crisis that youth have experienced since then is still underway. We can see it in the rising suicide rates for Black youth and for Indigenous communities. We see it in the increases in anxiety and depression, and we see it play out in ways within schools, particularly around behavior and around academic outcomes.
Now, the cuts to these programs obviously will affect all types of students, but they are trying to at least target these sort of so-called DEI measures. But your research shows that students of color are less likely to have access to mental health supports in schools. So how do these cuts make these existing problems worse?
Yeah. So honestly, it's really about making sure that the kids who need the most get the most support. It's about really efficiency and making sure that we are effective. And so making sure that students of color who are more likely to experience the adverse effects of society's racism and bias, and are more likely to experience poverty as well as other community violence issues. So really making sure that those who experience the most mental health crises are getting the most supports.
Yeah. Now, the state of California is suing the Trump administration on this. Are you hopeful that these cuts can be reversed? And if not, what else can schools do? Are there alternatives that actually work?
Yeah, so I am hopeful that they'll be reversed, but let's be clear that this is a huge disruption for schools, even if it is reversed. Even if the Trump administration tries to do something else around making sure that there's funding later on, at this point, schools really need the money to support students, and they're not going to get it. And so one thing that states can really do and really should do is to safeguard the funding for the students who need it the most, make sure that they are distributing funding to schools in a way where those who need the most get the most, and then really being strategic about how the money is being spent within schools. So again, making sure that, for example, things like SROs or school resource officers, school police, and metal detectors that aren't really effective, which take up a huge amount of funding, are deprioritized, and then the funding is redirected to the things that we know do work, like mental health supports.
All right, listen, really appreciate you joining us on this important topic that affects so many children. Nancy Duchesneau, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.